Life has its way of testing all of us. How we rise when we get knocked down helps develop our character.
Some people face more challenges than others, and for one lacrosse man, his road to recovery is a clear example of rising from rock bottom.
News 8's Lisa Klein has his story of salvation.
A morning walk in downtown La Crosse
I actually make it a habit.
takes Chris Sikorsky
I go to school at Western Technical College.
past the Salvation Army on his way to class.
That's kind of what keeps me going sometimes.
Chris is in the Human Services program at Western and plans to work with the homeless or those living with addiction or mental illness.
100% committed to this career path.
But for you to fully understand Chris's commitment to his education, you need to understand the downhill slide that led him to this point in his life.
It was a long, long descent, and I clawed my way down the entire way.
Chris was an only child who grew up outside of Wausau, Wisconsin.
I had a lot of good experiences growing up.
He was a typical kid with good memories of his childhood, but at about age 11,
I've always been a person who struggled to fit in.
he discovered a way to become popular among his peers.
Drugs and alcohol became the great equalizer.
Chris was a rebellious teen.
And so we were running around partying and clubbing all the time, doing all these rave drugs, like ecstasy, ketamine, things like that.
He remained a partier involved with drugs and alcohol into his mid-30s.
I always think endurance has been one of my strong points. I managed to just keep on making do.
In 2010, Chris's drug and alcohol use intensified.
My capacity to hold things together just started diminishing.
Realizing he had no resources left, Chris turned to the Salvation Army.
We keep a cot in each of these. I brought all my mental health and my addiction problems into the Salvation Army with me.
He OD'd several times while he was here. He had severe addiction problems. They called the ambulance many times. And one time he was completely out of it when the ambulance came.
I would use so many sedatives at night that they couldn't wake me up the next morning.
Chris's addictions caused him to be kicked out of the Salvation Army a number of times. He felt helpless and trapped in his situation.
Here is where I would say I was at my absolute rock bottom because of that hopelessness. I was actively considering suicide.
Chris says that is when he knew he had to do something.
I connected with La Crosse County, connected with the behavioral health unit at Mayo, started connecting with the various 12-step groups that we have in town.
In June of 2017, Chris finally found salvation in a sober living house run by La Crosse County. Intense outpatient therapy and recovery meetings paved him a pathway to live again.
I started to see that I might have a place in recovery.
He still struggled with his addictions.
You can't go from just 60 to 0 instantly. It was a slow process applying the brakes throughout that couple-month period.
Until he took his last drink and chose sobriety.
I still vividly remember the last time I used. It was July 6th of 2017.
Since that time, he moved to the Driftless Recovery Sober Living House, where he was a resident and is now the house manager.
I love my work here. I am so blessed to be able to work with exactly the types of populations that I want to serve professionally after I complete school.
Chris hopes to graduate from Western with an associate's degree in human services next spring.
Second to my sobriety, going back to school was, the next most instrumental thing in my life.
He plans to use his college degree and life experience to model his rise from rock bottom.
I've found that new lifestyle that for so many years I was seeking.
To his friends still living on the streets.
And it's filled with hope and connection.
In hopes of being part of their story of salvation. In La Crosse, Lisa Klein, News 8.